I used to believe that family was the safest place in the world. A place where people loved you unconditionally, protected you, and stood by your side no matter what. I grew up thinking that sacrifice for family was the most natural thing a person could do. For 6 years, I gave everything I had to support my parents and my younger sister, Olivia. I sent money home every single month without question. But I never imagined that my loyalty would become the very trap they used against me. Until that night when I accidentally heard a conversation I was never meant to hear. Before I dive deeper into this story, let me know where you are watching from today. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Now let me tell you how everything began. I grew up in a small town in Ohio in a modest house with a patched roof and a yard that always needed mowing. My father worked as a plumber, spending long days crawling under sinks and fixing leaky pipes. My mother worked part-time as a cashier at the local grocery store. We were not rich by any measure, but we had enough to get by. Dinner was always on the table and the lights stayed on. That was more than some families had, and I knew it. My sister Olivia came into the world 3 years after me. From the moment she arrived, everything in our household seemed to shift. My parents always said she was sensitive, delicate, the kind of child who needed extra care and protection. Being the older brother, I was taught early on that my job was to look out for her. I accepted that role without question. It felt like the right thing to do. As we grew older, the differences in how my parents treated us became more obvious. When I turned 16, I got my first job bagging groceries at the same store where my mother worked. I used that money to buy my own school supplies, my own clothes, and whatever else I needed. My parents praised me for being responsible and mature. They told me I was becoming a man. Olivia turned 16 and received a brand new smartphone for her birthday. She got new clothes every season and never had to work a single day. When I asked my mother why the treatment was so different, she simply said that girls need more care. They need to be protected and provided for. Boys are stronger. Boys can handle hardship. I nodded and accepted her explanation because I loved my family and trusted them completely. When I graduated high school, I got accepted into a state university about 2 hours from home. I was excited but quickly learned that my parents could not afford to help with tuition or living expenses. They said money was tight, that they were still paying off the mortgage on the house, that every dollar was stretched thin. So I worked 2 jobs while attending classes full-time. I survived on 4 hours of sleep most nights, fueled by cheap coffee and determination. I graduated at 22 with a degree in accounting. It took me 5 years instead of 4 because I had to take lighter course loads to accommodate my work schedule. But I did it. I walked across that stage with my diploma in hand, and my parents sat in the audience clapping. For one brief moment, I felt like all the sacrifice had been worth it. Within 2 months of graduation, I landed a job at a mid-sized accounting firm in Columbus. The starting salary was modest but respectable. $52,000 a year felt like a fortune to someone who had been living on ramen noodles and gas station coffee. I rented a small studio apartment, bought a used car, and started building what I thought would be my new life. The first month I received my paycheck, my father called. His voice was heavy with worry as he explained that the roof was leaking again and needed serious repairs. My mother's car had broken down, and fixing it would cost more than they had saved. They needed $1,500 urgently. I transferred the money that same night without hesitation. From that point forward, sending money home became routine. Every month, I sent between $800 and $1,200, depending on what they said they needed. Sometimes it was for medical bills. Sometimes it was for utility payments. Sometimes it was for unexpected emergencies that always seemed to pop up at the worst times. I never questioned any of it because they were my family. To afford these payments, I made sacrifices. I kept living in that tiny studio apartment even when I could have afforded something better. I did not go on vacations. I did not buy new clothes unless absolutely necessary. I ate most meals at home and rarely went out with coworkers. Dating was almost impossible because I had no money to spend on anyone, including myself. This continued for 6 years. 6 years of working overtime, of saying no to opportunities, of putting my own life on hold. When I calculated the total amount I had sent home, it came to nearly $80,000. $80,000 that I trusted my parents to use wisely. $80,000 that I believed was keeping my family afloat. The first cracks in my trust appeared gradually, like hairline fractures that I refused to acknowledge. I noticed things but explained them away because the alternative was too painful to consider. Olivia graduated from college with a degree in marketing around the time I turned 25. She moved back home and claimed she was looking for the right opportunity. Months passed, and she bounced from job to job, never staying anywhere longer than a few weeks. She always had excuses. The boss was terrible, the commute was too long, the work was beneath her talents. What confused me was her lifestyle. I followed her on social media, and her posts told a very different story than the struggling job seeker she claimed to be. There were photos from a beach resort in Cancun. There were pictures of designer handbags and expensive shoes. There were check-ins at upscale restaurants that I could never afford. When I asked my parents about it, they had ready answers. Olivia was smart with money, they said. She found great deals. She had friends who treated her. The explanations seemed thin, but I wanted to believe them, so I did. One Thanksgiving, I drove home for the holiday. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed a new car parked in front of the house. It was a sleek white sedan, maybe 2 years old at most. When I asked about it, my mother said Olivia had bought it herself on a payment plan. I congratulated my sister on her purchase, but something felt off. I started noticing other things too. The house looked different. The old worn carpet had been replaced with hardwood floors. The kitchen had new appliances. My father's garage was filled with expensive power tools. My mother had a closet full of new clothes with tags still attached. For a family that claimed to be struggling with bills, they seemed to be living quite comfortably. I pushed these observations to the back of my mind. I told myself that maybe they had gotten better at managing money. Maybe they had received some unexpected windfall they had not mentioned. I did not want to believe the worst about the people I loved. Then Marcus called. Marcus and I had been best friends in high school. We drifted apart after graduation, as people often do, but we still kept in touch occasionally. He had gone into banking and worked at a branch in our hometown. His voice sounded strange when I answered the phone. Hesitant, uncomfortable. He asked if we could talk about something sensitive, and I agreed, having no idea what was coming. Marcus explained that he had been processing some paperwork at the bank when he came across my father's name. He recognized it immediately and noticed something that confused him. According to the records, my parents had paid off their mortgage completely 3 years ago. I felt the blood drain from my face. 3 years ago. That meant for the past 3 years, every time my parents told me they needed money for the mortgage, they had been lying. The house was already paid off. There was no debt left to pay. I thanked Marcus for telling me and hung up the phone. My hands were shaking. My mind was racing through every conversation, every request for money, every excuse they had given me. How much of it had been true? How much had been fabrication? That night I could not sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that there had to be an explanation. Maybe Marcus was wrong. Maybe there was another loan I did not know about. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions. But deep down, the seed of doubt had been planted, and it would not stop growing. 2 weeks later, I made a decision. Instead of calling ahead to announce my visit like I always did, I would drive home unannounced. I needed to see things for myself. I needed answers. I left work early on a Friday afternoon and made the 2-hour drive in silence. No music, no podcasts, just the sound of tires on asphalt and my own turbulent thoughts. When I arrived at the house, it was early evening. The lights were on inside, and I could see Olivia's white sedan parked in the driveway. I pulled up to the curb quietly and walked to the front door. It was unlocked, as it often was in our small town. I stepped inside, planning to surprise everyone. But as I moved through the entryway, I heard voices coming from the living room. My parents and Olivia were talking, and something in their tone made me stop. I pressed myself against the hallway wall and listened. My father spoke first. He said that I had sent $1,200 this month, which was enough to cover Olivia's car insurance and still leave some extra. Then my mother's voice. She said it was a shame that I still thought the money was going toward the mortgage. But what could they do? Olivia needed support more than I needed to know the truth. I heard Olivia laugh. She called me foolish. She said I worked like a dog and did not know how to enjoy life. She said she was different. She knew how to live. My parents laughed along with her. No one defended me. No one suggested that what they were doing was wrong. I stood frozen in that hallway, unable to move or breathe. 6 years, $80,000. Every sacrifice I had made, every luxury I had denied myself, every dream I had postponed. All of it had been funneled to my sister so she could live the life I was too busy working to enjoy. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. My chest tightened, my eyes burned. Everything I thought I knew about my family crumbled in that moment. I backed out of the house as silently as I had entered. They never knew I was there. I drove back to Columbus in a daze. The highway lights blurred past me as my mind replayed what I had heard over and over again. By the time I reached my apartment, it was past midnight, and I felt hollow inside. For 3 days, I barely functioned. I called in sick to work. I did not eat. I did not sleep. I just sat in my apartment scrolling through years of text messages and emails from my parents. Every request for money, every story about financial hardship, every expression of gratitude for my generosity. It all looked different now. Every word felt like a knife. I wanted to call them and demand answers. I wanted to scream at them for using me. But I knew how that conversation would go. They would deny everything. They would twist my words. They would make me feel guilty for doubting them. They had been manipulating me for years. They were experts at it. So I made a different choice. I would not confront them. I would not give them the chance to gaslight me or make excuses. Instead, I would simply disappear from their lives the same way they had disappeared my money. I started planning immediately. First, I opened a new bank account at a different institution, one that had no connection to my family. I redirected my paycheck deposits and began building a fund they could not access or track. Next, I searched for apartments in a different city. I found a place about 4 hours away in a suburb where no one knew me. I signed the lease using my company as the reference, keeping my personal information as private as possible. Then I went to my manager and requested a transfer to a branch office. I told him I was looking for new challenges and opportunities for growth. He agreed immediately because I had always been a reliable employee. The transfer would take effect in 6 weeks. Every day after work, I packed a few more items into boxes. I made multiple trips to my new apartment, moving my belongings gradually, so no one would notice anything unusual. I sold the furniture I could not take and donated the rest. During this entire time, I maintained the facade. I called my parents every Sunday like I always did. I sent money at the beginning of each month like clockwork. I laughed at their jokes and listened to their stories and pretended that nothing had changed. It was the hardest acting performance of my life. On my final night in the old apartment, I sat on the bare floor and looked around at the empty walls. 6 years of my life had been spent in this city working for a family that saw me as nothing more than a source of income. I had given them everything and kept nothing for myself. I wrote a short note and left it on the kitchen counter. The note said only this: I know everything. I heard what you said that night. Do not try to find me. I locked the door one last time, dropped the key in the mailbox, and drove away without looking back. I left my old phone in the apartment. I had already activated a new number that only my employer and a few trusted colleagues knew. My old life was over. My new life was beginning. That first night in my new apartment, I lay on a mattress on the floor and stared at the unfamiliar ceiling. I felt relief and grief in equal measure. I had escaped, but I had also lost my family. Whether that family had ever truly existed was a question I could not answer. 3 days after my disappearance, the panic began. My mother tried calling my old number repeatedly. When she could not reach me, she asked a neighbor to check on my apartment. The neighbor reported back that the place was empty, cleared out completely. All that remained was a note. Within hours, my parents had read what I had written. According to what I later learned from Marcus, they were frantic. My father called everyone he could think of. Old friends, former classmates, coworkers from my previous jobs. No one knew where I had gone. Olivia took to social media. She posted a dramatic message saying that her beloved brother had gone missing and begging people to help find him. She played the role of the concerned sister perfectly. The same sister who had laughed about taking my money just weeks before. My parents even contacted the police, but the officers explained that I was an adult, with every right to relocate without informing anyone. There was no evidence of foul play. I had simply chosen to leave. For 2 months, I lived in peace. I settled into my new job, explored my new city, and slowly began to rebuild myself. I made new friends who knew nothing about my past. I started spending money on things that made me happy. I bought new clothes, went to restaurants, and even planned a weekend trip just for myself. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living my own life instead of funding someone else's. Then my father found me. I never learned exactly how he tracked down my new phone number. My best guess is that he contacted someone at my company's headquarters and convinced them to share it. However it happened, the result was the same. One evening, my phone rang with an unknown number, and when I answered, I heard my father's voice. He was crying. He said he was sorry that the family had made mistakes, that they needed me to come home. He said the house felt empty without me, that my mother could not stop crying, that Olivia missed her brother. I listened without responding. Over the next few weeks, they all tried. My mother called and said she was sick, that she needed me to take care of her. I checked with her doctor through a family friend and learned she was perfectly healthy. Olivia sent long text messages full of excuses. She claimed our parents had pressured her to accept the money. She said she was also a victim of their manipulation. She said she never meant to hurt me. I read every message, but responded to none. I had heard enough of their words to last a lifetime. Words meant nothing when actions told the truth. 6 months after I left, I agreed to meet my father. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I needed closure. I chose a coffee shop in a neutral city, halfway between his home and mine. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. He looked 10 years older. His hair had gone gray. His shoulders slumped with a weight I had never seen before. He sat across from me and immediately began pleading. He admitted they had been wrong. He promised things would be different. He begged me to give the family another chance. I let him finish. Then I asked him one question. I said, "Dad, did you ever once think about what it felt like for me? Working 12-hour days, living in a tiny apartment, never taking a vacation, never buying anything for myself. Did you ever consider that I was a person with my own needs and dreams?" He sat there in silence. He had no answer. I stood up from the table. I told him that I did not hate him or Mom or Olivia. Hate takes too much energy, and I had wasted enough of my life on them already. But I could not continue a relationship built on exploitation. I wished them well. I hoped they would find whatever they were looking for, but I would not be their source of support anymore. I walked out of that coffee shop and did not look back. The first year after leaving was the hardest of my life. I had spent so many years defining myself by what I could give to others that I had forgotten how to live for myself. I did not know what I liked, what I wanted, or who I was outside of being the responsible older brother. I started seeing a therapist, someone who specialized in family trauma and codependency. She helped me understand that setting boundaries was not selfish. It was necessary. She taught me that I could love people and still refuse to let them hurt me. Slowly, I began to heal. I made friends who appreciated me for who I was, not for what I could provide. I started hobbies I had always wanted to try but never had time or money for. I went hiking on weekends. I learned to cook real meals instead of just surviving on cheap fast food. I took a vacation for the first time in my adult life, a week-long trip to the mountains where I did nothing but read books and watch sunsets. I also started saving money for my own future. After years of sending everything home, it felt strange at first to keep my earnings for myself. But gradually the guilt faded. I realized that taking care of myself was not a betrayal. It was what I should have been doing all along. 2 years have passed since I drove away from that empty apartment. I am a different person now. I have my own home, my own savings, my own life. I have people who care about me genuinely, not because of what I can give them. I do not have a relationship with my parents or Olivia anymore. Occasionally I hear updates through Marcus. They are struggling now that the money flow has stopped. Olivia had to sell her car. My parents had to cut back on expenses. Part of me feels a distant sadness about that. But a larger part knows that their problems are not mine to solve. I learned something important through all of this. Family should not be a burden you carry alone. Love should flow in both directions. Sacrifice only has meaning when it is appreciated and reciprocated. When those conditions are not met, you have every right to walk away. I do not regret the years I spent supporting my family. Those experiences taught me about hard work, resilience, and the person I wanted to become. But I also do not regret leaving. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself. If you are watching this and you see yourself in my story, I want you to know something. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Your needs matter. Your dreams matter. You deserve to be loved for who you are, not used for what you can provide. Walking away from my family was the hardest decision I ever made. It was also the best one. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? How did you find the strength to put yourself first? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story touched you, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you have not already, subscribe to the channel so you do not miss more stories like this one. Thank you for being here and for listening to my journey. I hope you find the courage to write your own story of freedom and healing. Take care of yourself.